I personally, as a casual, didn't hear a ton of what was going. I know there's a ton of transfer portal stuff for every team. I started this summer and I was trying to keep track of all of it, and then I got a little overwhelmed, and I just decided it wasn't worth the energy to list out and try to remember every portal move that was made for each team, especially when there's 14 teams. If you could just let us know, though, who was the biggest loss that you guys had from the portal, and then who did you guys gain from the portal that's going to help you guys out next year?
Yeah, so to be honest, Illinois did a great job of retaining their stars in this kind of era. You see all these different players, whether they're buried on the roster or not, go for that NIL bag, so to speak.
Right.
And I think they did a really, really good job of retaining their stars because, reportedly there were offers through back channels and all of that, towards some of the players on the team, that could have gone elsewhere for their final year of eligibility and made quite the killing. But I think Illinois did a good job of one, stepping it up in their NIL game, but then also making the pitch to return to the team. They're returning a lot of their stars with Keith Randolph, Johnny Newton, Isaiah Adams and Julian Pearl all had opportunities to not only enter the NFL draft, excuse me, but also get NIL packages elsewhere. So I think overall there wasn't a huge loss. The biggest loss I would say is probably one of their wide receivers, their second wide receiver, Brian Hightower, had over
Mm-hmm.
40 catches this year. Would have been one of the older guys in a pretty thin wide receiver room, one that doesn't really have that much returning production outside of Isaiah Williams. They lost him to Cal, but that seemed more like a situation where he wanted to be closer to home. The guys from California, I think going back home for a year made a lot of sense for him. And then having a guy like Isaiah Williams there too, it just made a lot of sense for Hightower to look elsewhere. But it does hurt Illinois in that they lose a pretty experienced and proven producer. But it's not something that they can't replace at the same time. I think in terms of adding, they had a guy that was going to be their starting center. They got an ECU transfer, Avery Jones, who was committed to Illinois and then was actually set to move in. But again, kind of like how we were talking about, that NIL kicked in from Auburn. It's pretty well publicized, and he ended up decommitting. So that could be counted as a loss, I think, for them because they did put a lot of eggs in that basket for Avery Jones, who's now committed to Auburn. I think in terms of the ads that they made, there hasn't been like okay, this guy's for sure going to start. I think they added a lot of depth in the transfer portal
Hmm.
that can just, really act as competition for their younger guys who are supposed to slot in. But then looking at the quarterback spot, I think that's probably where you see the biggest ad. They try to get Tommy DeVito, who was a Syracuse transfer, one more year of eligibility. Unfortunately, that failed. DeVito's now on the Giants after being undrafted in this past draft, but they got Luke Altmaier from Ole Miss. I think it's a great ad. Maybe may not be as solid as DeVito, but he has a higher ceiling for sure, and he has multiple years of eligibility. So just having that quarterback that can be there for a couple years is something Illinois has not had in quite some time. So I think it's really interesting to see how Luke Altmaier will progress because he's no doubt the starting quarterback for this year.